in the shadowed corridors of Buckingham Palace, where whispers carry more weight than official statements. A single phone call would shatter the carefully maintained silence. Princess, and known for her unwavering loyalty and fierce independence, stood at her study window watching the morning mist rise from the palace gardens. She had just finished reading the latest headlines that painted her nephew William and his wife Catherine in an unforgiving light. The palace machinery was failing them, and knew that sometimes the most powerful move comes not from the crown, but from the heart of someone who refuses to watch families suffer in silence. What happened next would send shockwave through the royal establishment and prove that even in the most traditional institution in Britain, love and loyalty could triumph over protocol and politics. The October morning arrived with an unusual chill that seemed to seep through the stone walls of Windsor Castle. Princess Anne had always been an early riser, but today she found herself awake before dawn, unable to shake the feeling that something significant was about to unfold. She dressed in her practical riding clothes and made her way to the stables, where her horse Bella waited with characteristic patience. Aslan guided Bella through the familiar paths of the estate. Her mind wandered to the conversation she had overheard the previous evening. Palace staff members, thinking themselves alone in the servants' corridor, had been discussing the mounting pressure on Prince William and Catherine. The whispered words had carried a weight that made Anne's stomach tighten with concern. "They're struggling to keep up with all the criticism," one voice had said. "The Princess of Wales looks exhausted, and Prince William seems to be carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders." And had paused in the shadows, her natural instinct to protect her family overriding any sense of propriety about eavesdropping. The staff member continued, "The palace communications team doesn't seem to know how to handle this latest wave of negative press. They're leaving William and Catherine to face it alone." The ride back to the castle did little to calm Anne's growing unease. She had watched her nephew grow from a grieving boy into a responsible man, and she had witnessed Catherine's transformation from a shy university student into a confident royal. Both had shown remarkable resilience over the years, but even the strongest people had their limits. After returning Bella to her stall, Anne made her way to her private study, where she began her morning routine of reviewing newspapers and official correspondence. What she found there confirmed her worst fears. The headlines were brutal, and the commentary was even worse. William and Catherine were being criticized for everything from their choice of charities to their parenting decisions. The tabloids seemed particularly focused on Catherine, with unflattering photographs and speculative articles about her supposed struggles with royal life, and set down the final newspaper with more force than necessary, causing her coffee cup to rattle against its saucer. She had seen this pattern before, and she knew how destructive it could be. The press had a way of creating narratives that could consume even the strongest individuals, and the palace's traditional approach of never complain, never explain seemed woefully inadequate in the face of modern media scrutiny. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her daughter Zara, who was in London for a charity event. "Have you seen the papers today? This is getting out of hand. Someone needs to do something." And stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Leave it with me." She spent the next hour making discreet phone calls to trusted contacts within the royal household. What she learned painted an even more troubling picture than she had imagined. William and Catherine were indeed struggling, not just with the public criticism, but with a sense of isolation within the very institution they served. The traditional support systems seemed to be failing them at precisely the moment when they needed them most. Her private secretary knocked softly on the study door before entering with the morning's official schedule. "Your Royal Highness, you have the hospital visit at 11, followed by lunch with the Commonwealth representatives, and then the evening reception for the Veterans Charity." And looked at her calendar and made a decision that would surprise everyone around her. "Cancel everything after the hospital visit. I need the afternoon free. Ma'am, the Commonwealth lunch has been planned for months, and the Prime Minister's office specifically requested your attendance. They'll have to manage without me," and replied firmly, "Family comes first." The hospital visit proceeded as scheduled, with her maintaining her usual professional demeanor as she toured the new children's ward. The young patients and their families had no idea of the storm brewing in her mind, and she made sure to give them her full attention. Children had always been able to ground her, to remind her of what truly mattered in life. During the car ride back to Windsor, and used the privacy of the vehicle to make another series of phone calls. This time, she reached out to William directly, something that surprised her nephew, given the formal protocols that usually governed royal communications. Aunt Anne. William's voice carried a note of confusion when he answered. I'm coming to see you and Catherine this afternoon. We need to talk. Is everything all right? Has something happened? Everything is not all right, but nothing has happened that we can't fix together. I'll be there at 3. The line went quiet for a moment before William responded. Of course. We'll be here. And arrived at Kensington Palace precisely at 3 o'clock, her driver pulling into the private courtyard away from any potential media attention. William and Catherine were waiting for her in their private sitting room, and could see immediately that the stress of recent weeks had taken its toll on both of them. Catherine rose to greet her with a warm embrace, and could feel the tension in her niece-in-law's shoulders. William looked tired in a way that went beyond simple fatigue, and recognized the same haunted expression that had marked his father's face during his own difficult periods. Thank you for coming, Catherine said quietly. We weren't sure who we could talk to about all this, and settled into the comfortable chair across from them, and studied their faces carefully. That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have to wonder who you can trust within your own family. She reached into her handbag and pulled out copies of the morning's newspapers, spreading them on the coffee table between them. This has gone far enough. The palace communication strategy is failing you both, and I won't stand by and watch while you're thrown to the wolves. William leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. We try to handle it the way we were taught, you know? Keep quiet, don't respond, let it blow over. But it's not blowing over this time. And why should it? And asked sharply. You're both working harder than most people realize, supporting causes that matter, raising your children with love and attention. Yet the narrative being pushed suggests you're somehow failing in your duties. Catherine spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes I wonder if I'm really cut out for this. The criticism feels so personal, so pointed. I know I shouldn't let it get to me, but when they question my ability to be a good mother or suggest that I don't take my role seriously. Stop right there, and interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. I've watched you for over a decade now, Catherine. I've seen how you've grown into your role, how you've found your voice, how you've balanced tradition with authenticity. Anyone who questions your commitment or your capabilities is either willfully blind or deliberately malicious. The conversation continued for over 2 hours, with and listening carefully to their concerns and frustrations. She learned about the mounting pressure they felt to be perfect, the isolation that came with their position, and the growing sense that they were fighting these battles alone. As the afternoon light began to fade, and made a decision that would change everything. She stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where William and Harry had once played as children. I've heard enough, she announced. Tomorrow, I'm calling a family meeting, not a formal palace gathering, but a real conversation between people who care about each other. This stops now. William and Catherine exchanged glances, a mixture of hope and apprehension in their expressions. They had both learned to be cautious about palace promises, but there was something in Anne's tone that suggested this time would be different. What do you have in mind? William asked, and turned back to face them, her expression determined. I'm going to do what I should have done weeks ago. I'm going to remind everyone in this family that we protect our own, regardless of protocol or politics. As she prepared to leave, Catherine reached out and took Anne's hand. Thank you for believing in us. I'm not just believing in you, Anne replied. I'm going to make sure everyone else does too. The drive back to Windsor gave Anne time to plan her next moves. She had allies within the family, people who shared her values and her commitment to supporting William and Catherine. But she also knew that challenging the established way of doing things would not be easy. That evening, as she sat in her study preparing for the battles ahead and reflected on the conversation with her nephew and his wife, they reminded her of herself at their age, trying to find their place within an institution that was both deeply loving and frustratingly rigid. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her brother Charles, calling from Highgrove. "And I heard you canceled your appointments today. Is everything all right?" "Everything will be all right," she replied carefully. "But we need to talk. All of us. Soon." The next morning would bring new challenges, and felt ready for them. She had spent too many years watching family members struggle in isolation, and she was determined that William and Catherine would not suffer the same fate. As she prepared for bed that night and made one final phone call to her mother, knowing that the Queen's support would be crucial for what came next. "Ma'am, it's Ann. I need to see you tomorrow morning. It's about William and Catherine, and it's urgent." The response was immediate and supportive. "Of course, darling. First thing in the morning," and smiled as she ended the call. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle as Princess and made her way to her mother's private apartments. She had barely slept, her mind racing with plans and strategies for the conversation ahead. The Queen had always been a source of wisdom and strength for her family, and knew that securing her support would be essential for what she hoped to accomplish. Queen Elizabeth was already dressed and seated at her small breakfast table when Anne arrived. Despite being in her 90s, the monarch maintained her sharp intellect and keen awareness of family dynamics. She gestured for her and to join her, pouring tea from the delicate china service that had been a wedding gift decades earlier. "You look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders this morning," the Queen observed, studying her daughter's face with the practiced eye of a mother who had raised 4 children through various crises, and settled in her chair and accepted the offered tea. "I'm worried about William and Catherine, ma'am. The situation is worse than I think any of us realized." She spent the next 30 minutes outlining everything she had learned during her visit to Kensington Palace, being careful to convey not just the facts, but the emotional toll the recent criticism was taking on the young couple. The Queen listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "They feel abandoned by the very institution they serve," and concluded. "And, frankly, I think they have good reason to feel that way." The Queen set down her teacup with deliberate precision. "What do you propose we do about it?" "I want to call a family council, not through official channels, not with private secretaries managing every detail, but a real gathering where we can speak freely about how to better support William and Catherine." The monarch considered this for a long moment. Throughout her reign, she had always been careful to balance family concerns with institutional responsibilities, but she had also learned that sometimes the most important decisions were the ones made from the heart rather than for protocol. "Who would you include in this council?" And had already given this considerable thought. "You, me, Charles, William, and Catherine, obviously. I think we should also include Sophie and Edward. She's navigated the transition from commoner to royal with grace, and her perspective could be valuable for Catherine." The Queen nodded slowly. "And when would you suggest we have this meeting?" "Today. This afternoon, if possible. The longer we wait, the more damage is done." The boldness of the proposal might have surprised others, but the Queen had always respected Anne's directness and her instinct for action. After a moment of consideration, she reached for the phone on her side table. "I'll have my private secretary arrange it." In formal setting, no staff present during the actual discussion, while the Queen made her calls and stepped onto the balcony overlooking the private gardens. She could see gardeners tending to the autumn flowers, their work continuing unchanged despite the turmoil within the castle walls. There was something reassuring about the continuity of such simple tasks, a reminder that life went on even during times of crisis. Her phone buzzed with a message from William. "Thank you for yesterday. Catherine slept better than she has in weeks. Whatever you're planning, we trust you completely." The simple expression of trust hit and harder than she had expected. She thought about the young man who had stood so bravely at his mother's funeral, the boy who had grown into a devoted husband and father while carrying the weight of future kingship. He deserved better than to feel isolated and unsupported. The Queen rejoined her on the balcony. It's arranged. Charles is driving down from Highgrove, Edward and Sophie are coming from Bagshot Park, and William and Catherine will be here at 3 o'clock. We'll meet in the oak drawing room, and felt a surge of gratitude toward her mother. Despite the unconventional nature of the request, the Queen had responded with the same decisiveness that had marked her entire reign. The afternoon arrived with surprising speed, and had spent the intervening hours walking through the castle gardens and reviewing her thoughts about how to approach the difficult conversation ahead. She knew that family dynamics could be complicated, especially when institutional responsibilities were involved, but she was determined to keep the focus on what was best for William and Catherine. Charles arrived first, his concern evident as he embraced his sister in the castle's entrance hall. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night. You're right that something needs to change." Edward and Sophie arrived shortly after, followed by William and Catherine, and noticed that Catherine looked more composed than she had the previous day, but there was still a tension around her eyes that spoke to ongoing stress. The oak drawing room had been chosen specifically for its informal atmosphere. Unlike the grand staterooms used for official functions, this space felt warm and welcoming, with comfortable furniture arranged in a circle that encouraged conversation rather than formal presentations. The Queen took her customary chair, but the mood was far from ceremonial, and had asked that no staff be present, and even the usual offer of refreshments had been set aside in favor of uninterrupted conversation. "I've asked and to explain why we're all here," the Queen began, her tone gentle but serious. "But I want everyone to know that this meeting is about family first and institution second," and stood and moved to the center of the circle. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We're here because 2 members of our family are struggling and the traditional support systems are failing them." She looked directly at William and Catherine. "I want you both to feel free to speak openly about what you're experiencing. No judgment, no immediate solutions, just honest conversation about what's really happening." William was the first to speak. "It's been building for months, really. The criticism, the constant scrutiny, the feeling that nothing we do is ever good enough. We've tried to handle it quietly, the way we were taught, but it's taking a toll on both of us and on our children." Catherine nodded, her voice steady but emotional. "The hardest part is feeling like we're letting people down, especially our family. We know how important our roles are, how much history and tradition we represent. But sometimes it feels impossible to live up to those expectations while also being authentic to ourselves." Sophie leaned forward. "I remember feeling exactly the same way during my early years in the family. The isolation can be overwhelming, especially when you feel like you can't speak honestly about your struggles." The conversation that followed was unlike any formal royal discussion. Family members shared their own experiences, offered support, and, most importantly, listened without judgment. Charles spoke about the pressure he had felt as heir to the throne. Edward discussed the challenges of finding his place within the institution, and the Queen offered perspective from her decades of experience. But it wasn't who brought the conversation to its crucial turning point. "We've established that William and Catherine need better support. The question now is, how do we provide it?" She had prepared for this moment, having spent considerable time thinking about practical solutions rather than simply emotional support. "First, I think we need to acknowledge that the palace communication strategy isn't working. The never complain, never explain approach might have worked in a different media environment, but it's leaving William and Catherine vulnerable in today's world." Charles nodded thoughtfully. "What do you suggest as an alternative?" "I suggest that we become more proactive in telling their story. Not defensive responses to criticism, but positive messaging that highlights their genuine contributions and their authentic personalities." The Queen had remained quiet for much of the discussion, but now she spoke with the authority of decades of experience, and is right about the communication strategy. "We've been too passive, too willing to let others control the narrative." William looked around the room, seeming to draw strength from the support surrounding him. What would that look like in practice? And had anticipated this question. It means making sure people see the real work you're doing, not just the ceremonial aspects. It means sharing more of your genuine selves while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. And it means having family members speak publicly about their support for you when appropriate. The suggestion of family members speaking publicly was significant. The royal family had traditionally maintained strict protocols about commenting on each other's work or defending each other against criticism. Sophie spoke up. I think that's exactly what's been missing. We've been so worried about maintaining dignity that we've forgotten the power of simple human solidarity. Edward agreed. When was the last time any of us publicly acknowledged how hard William and Catherine work, or how well they're raising their children, or how much they brought to their roles? The Queen considered this carefully. There are risks to changing our approach. Once we begin commenting more openly, it becomes more difficult to maintain the mystique that has traditionally protected the monarchy. But what's the alternative? And asked, we maintain the mystique while watching two of our most valuable family members suffer in silence. The room fell quiet as everyone processed the implications of what was being discussed. They were talking about fundamentally changing how the royal family operated, prioritizing family welfare over institutional tradition. Catherine finally broke the silence. We don't want special treatment or protection from legitimate criticism. We just want to feel like we're part of a team rather than isolated individuals trying to figure everything out alone. Charles reached over and took his daughter-in-law's hand. You are part of a team, Catherine. We've just done a poor job of showing it. The Queen stood and moved to the window, looking out at the grounds where her children had played decades earlier. When she turned back to the group, her expression was resolute. I've made my decision, and will coordinate a new approach to supporting William and Catherine with input from all of us. We'll start with small changes, more visible family support, and better coordination of our messaging, and felt a surge of relief and determination. Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down. The meeting continued for another hour, with specific strategies being discussed and responsibilities being assigned. By the time it concluded, there was a palpable sense of renewed unity and purpose in the room. As family members prepared to leave, the Queen asked William and Catherine to stay behind for a private conversation, and watch from the corridor as her mother spoke quietly with the young couple, seeing the tension finally begin to leave their shoulders. Walking back to her own apartments and reflected on what had been accomplished. They had taken the first steps toward changing how the royal family supported its members, but the real work was just beginning. That evening, she made a series of phone calls to trusted contacts in the media, carefully planting the seeds for a more positive narrative about William and Catherine's work. She also reached out to palace staff members who she knew shared her concerns about the current situation. The next morning would bring new challenges, and felt confident that they were finally moving in the right direction. For the first time in weeks, she fell asleep easily, knowing that William and Catherine were no longer fighting their battles alone. The following morning brought an unexpected development that would test the royal family's new commitment to supporting William and Catherine, and was reviewing correspondence in her study when her private secretary knocked urgently on the door. Your Royal Highness, there's been a development. One of the tabloids is running a particularly harsh piece about the Princess of Wales this morning. The Palace Communications Office is asking how you'd like to respond, and set down her papers and reached for the newspaper her secretary handed her. The headline made her stomach tighten with anger. Kate's royal failure. Palace sources question her commitment. The article was filled with unnamed sources making cruel allegations about Catherine's work ethic and dedication to her royal duties. Have William and Catherine seen this yet? And asked, her voice carefully controlled despite her rising fury. I believe so, ma'am. Prince William's office has received several calls from media outlets asking for comment, and stood and moved to her window, looking out at the peaceful morning scene while her mind raced with possibilities. This was exactly the kind of attack they had discussed the day before, and it presented the perfect opportunity to test their new approach to family solidarity. She turned back to her secretary. Clear my morning schedule. I'm going to London. Ma'am, you have the regimental review at 11 and the lunch with the Agricultural Society representatives. Send my apologies. This is more important. Within an hour, and was in her car driving toward London, her phone buzzing with messages from various family members who had also seen the morning's coverage. Charles had sent a brief but supportive text. This is exactly what we discussed. Time to put our plan into action. Edward's message was more direct. Enough is enough. Sophie and I are ready to support however you need. But it was a call from her mother that solidified Anne's resolve. The Queen's voice was calm, but determined when she spoke. And I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I believe it's time for you to make that public statement we discussed. Are you certain, ma'am? Once I do this, there's no going back to the old way of handling things. I'm certain. Catherine and William need to know that their family stands behind them, and the public needs to understand the truth about their dedication and character. And have been preparing for this moment since the family meeting the previous day. She had drafted a statement in her mind, one that would be unprecedented in its directness and personal nature. Royal family members rarely commented publicly on each other's work or defended each other against media criticism, and was prepared to break that protocol. She arrived at Kensington Palace to find William and Catherine in their private sitting room, the offending newspaper spread on the coffee table between them. Both looked tired and discouraged, and could see that the latest attack had undone much of the positive effect of the previous day's family meeting. I've seen it, and said without preamble as she entered the room, and I'm going to do something about it. Catherine looked up with a mixture of hope and apprehension. And you don't have to put yourself in the middle of this. We've learned to cope with these kinds of attacks. No, you haven't learned to cope. You've learned to suffer in silence. And there's a difference. And settled into the chair across from them. I'm going to issue a public statement defending you both, and I'm going to do it today. William leaned forward, concern evident in his expression. That's not how things are done, Aunt Anne. The palace will be furious if you break protocol like that. Let them be furious. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. And pulled out her phone and showed them the draft statement she had been working on during the drive to London. As they read it, she watched their expressions change from surprise to gratitude to something approaching relief. You would really do this for us? Catherine asked quietly. I would do this because it's the truth, and because your family, and because someone needs to set the record straight. The statement Anne had prepared was unlike anything a senior royal had ever released. It was personal, direct, and uncompromisingly supportive of William and Catherine. It praised their work ethic, their dedication to their children, and their genuine commitment to their royal duties. More importantly, it called out the media's unfair treatment and challenged the public to look beyond sensationalized headlines to see the reality of their contributions. When do you want to release it? William asked. This afternoon. I want to coordinate with the Palace Communications Office, not to ask permission, but to ensure maximum impact, and spent the next 2 hours at Kensington Palace, working with William and Catherine to refine the statement and plan its release. They also discussed the likely reactions and prepared for the media storm that would inevitably follow. As she prepared to leave, Catherine embraced her warmly. Thank you for believing in us enough to take this risk. I'm not taking a risk, Anne replied firmly. I'm telling the truth. There's no risk in that. The drive back to Windsor gave Anne time to make the necessary phone calls to coordinate the statement's release. She contacted trusted journalists who she knew would present the story fairly, and she alerted other family members about what was coming. The response from the Palace Communications Office was predictably cautious. Your Royal Highness, this is highly unusual. We typically don't respond to tabloid criticism, and we certainly don't have family members making public statements of this nature. Then, perhaps it's time to change that approach, Anne replied coolly. The current strategy clearly isn't working. The statement was released at 4 o'clock that afternoon, sent simultaneously to major news outlets, and posted on Anne's official social media accounts. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, Anne's phone was ringing with calls from journalists seeking additional comment. Social media exploded with support for both Anne's bold move and for William and Catherine. The public response was largely positive, with many people expressing admiration for Anne's willingness to speak publicly in defense of her family. But it was the response from within the royal family that mattered most to Anne. Text messages and calls poured in from relatives expressing their support and admiration for her courage. Sophie called within an hour of the statement's release. And that was brilliant. Edward and I have been talking, and we want to follow your lead with our own statement of support. Charles's call came shortly after. I'm proud of you for taking that stand. It's exactly what the family needed to see. Even some of the more traditional members of the royal household expressed quiet approval for Anne's actions. It seemed that many people had been waiting for someone to take the lead in defending William and Catherine. The media coverage that evening was extensive and largely positive. Royal commentators praised Anne's statement for its authenticity and directness, and many noted that it represented a significant departure from traditional royal communications. But the real validation came the next morning, when Anne received a handwritten note from Catherine that had been delivered by courier. The message was simple but heartfelt. Yesterday changed everything for us. For the first time in months, we feel like we're not fighting this battle alone. Thank you for your courage and your love. The impact of Anne's statement extended far beyond its immediate effect on William and Catherine's morale. It signaled a new approach to royal family solidarity, one that prioritized truth and mutual support over institutional protocol. Over the following days, other family members began to follow Anne's example. Edward and Sophie released their own statement of support, praising William and Catherine's work with military families and their commitment to mental health advocacy. Charles made positive comments about his son and daughter-in-law during a public appearance, noting their dedication to their roles and their excellence as parents. The coordinated show of family support had a dramatic effect on the media narrative surrounding William and Catherine. Journalists began to focus more on their actual work and achievements rather than manufactured controversies. The positive coverage started to outweigh the negative for the first time in months, and continued to monitor the situation closely, ready to intervene again if necessary. She had discovered that breaking protocol could be remarkably effective when done for the right reasons and with careful thought about the consequences. A week after her initial statement, and was invited to lunch with William and Catherine at Kensington Palace. The difference in their demeanor was striking. Both seemed more relaxed and confident, and there was a lightness in their conversation that had been missing for months. The children have noticed the change too, Catherine shared during lunch. They've been asking fewer questions about why Mummy looks sad when she reads the newspapers. William added, "It's amazing how much difference it makes to know that the family is behind us. We feel like we can face whatever comes next." Anne smiled, feeling satisfied with the results of her decision to break protocol. This is how it should always have been. We're stronger when we support each other openly and honestly. As she prepared to leave that afternoon and reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. By choosing to prioritize family loyalty over institutional tradition, she had helped create a new model for royal family solidarity. The success of her intervention had also given her ideas for further changes that could benefit not just William and Catherine, but the entire royal family. She began to envision a more open and supportive approach to royal life, one that balanced respect for tradition with the needs of individual family members. That evening, as she reviewed the positive coverage of William and Catherine's latest royal engagement, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Sometimes the most important victories came not from following the rules, but from having the courage to break them when family needed protection. The transformation she had helped initiate was just the beginning, and was already planning her next moves to ensure that the royal family's new commitment to mutual support would become a permanent part of how they operated. The old way of leaving family members to struggle alone was ending, and and was determined to make sure it never returned. 3 months had passed since Princess Anne's bold intervention, and the transformation within the royal family was remarkable. The November morning found Anne in her study at Gatcombe Park, reviewing invitations and correspondence while the autumn rain tapped gently against the windows. Her desk was covered with letters from members of the public praising the royal family's new approach to communication and support. Among the correspondence was a particularly meaningful letter from a young mother who wrote, "Seeing Princess and defend Prince William and Princess Catherine so publicly gave me the courage to stand up for my own family when they were being criticized unfairly. Thank you for showing us that loyalty and love should always come first," and smiled as she set the letter aside. The ripple effects of her decision to break protocol had extended far beyond the palace walls, inspiring others to prioritize family solidarity over social expectations. Her phone buzzed with a text from William. "Catherine, and I would like to invite you to dinner this weekend. We have some news to share, and we want you to be the first to know." The mysterious invitation intrigued, but it would have to wait. Today marked the launch of the royal family's new joint initiative on mental health awareness, a project that had emerged directly from the honest conversations that began with that crucial family meeting months earlier. The initiative represented everything and had hoped to achieve through her intervention. Instead of individual family members working in isolation, they had come together to create something more powerful and meaningful than any of them could have accomplished alone, and arrive at the London venue to find William and Catherine already there, greeting guests and speaking with mental health advocates. The change in their demeanor since October was striking. Both moved with renewed confidence and energy, and their interactions with the public seemed more natural and relaxed than they had in months. The event itself was a testament to the power of family collaboration. Charles spoke about the importance of breaking down stigma around mental health issues, while Edward and Sophie shared their experiences working with organizations that supported families in crisis, and contributed her perspective on resilience and the importance of seeking help when facing challenges. But it was William and Catherine who truly shone during the event. Their presentation about the interconnection between family support and mental health was deeply personal and remarkably powerful. They spoke openly about the importance of having people who believe in you during difficult times, and their words carried the weight of recent experience. Mental health isn't just about individual struggle, Catherine explained to the gathered audience. It's about the support systems that surround us, the people who refuse to let us face our challenges alone, and the courage to ask for help when we need it. William added, "We've learned that vulnerability can be a strength when it's met with understanding and support. The same is true for families, for communities, and for institutions." And watched from the audience, feeling deeply proud of how far they had all come. The young couple who had sat in her study months earlier, feeling isolated and overwhelmed, had transformed into confident advocates for change. After the event, the family gathered for a private dinner at Clarence House. The atmosphere was relaxed and celebratory, with conversation flowing easily among all the attendees. And noticed how naturally William and Catherine now interacted with other family members, the tension and guardedness that had marked their previous gatherings completely gone. During dessert, Charles stood to make a toast. "I want to acknowledge someone whose courage and wisdom made today possible, and your willingness to challenge how we do things, to prioritize family over protocol, has made us all stronger." The room erupted in agreement, with family members offering their own words of gratitude and admiration for Anne's leadership during the crisis. But it was Catherine who offered the most meaningful tribute. "And you saved us when we didn't even know we needed saving. You showed us that being part of this family means more than just sharing a title or carrying out duties together. It means caring for each other as people, not just as representatives of an institution," and felt tears threatening as she stood to respond. What we accomplished together proves that tradition and innovation don't have to be enemies. We can honor the past while adapting to meet present needs. The weekend dinner invitation that William had mentioned turned out to be another family celebration, though this one was much smaller and more intimate, and arrived at Kensington Palace on Saturday evening to find the whole family gathered in the private dining room, with special attention paid to creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. After dinner, William and Catherine asked everyone to gather in the sitting room for their announcement, and could see excitement and nervousness in both their faces as they prepared to share their news. "We wanted you all to hear this together," William began, taking Catherine's hand. "Catherine and I are expecting our fourth child." The room erupted in congratulations and embraces, with family members expressing their joy and excitement about the newest addition to the royal family. And notice something particularly significant about the announcement itself. "We're sharing this news with you first," Catherine continued, "because we've learned how important it is to have family support from the very beginning. We want this pregnancy and this child to be surrounded by love and protection from day one," and felt a deep sense of satisfaction hearing those words. The isolation and vulnerability that had marked William and Catherine's earlier experiences were clearly things of the past. They now approached major life events with confidence in their family support. In the months that followed, the royal family's new approach to mutual support continued to evolve and strengthen, and found herself in the role of unofficial family coordinator, helping to ensure that no one felt overwhelmed or unsupported in their duties. When Sophie faced criticism for comments she made during a charity event, the family immediately rallied around her with public statements of support and private encouragement. When Charles dealt with health concerns, family members adjusted their schedules to help maintain continuity in royal duties without putting additional pressure on him. The media began to notice and comment on the royal family's increased solidarity. Royal correspondents wrote about the new royal model that prioritized family welfare alongside institutional responsibilities. Public approval ratings for individual family members rose significantly, and the monarchy as a whole seemed more relevant and relatable to modern audiences. Anne's role in initiating these changes became widely known and appreciated. She received honors and recognition from various organizations for her leadership in modernizing royal family dynamics while maintaining respect for tradition. But the recognition that meant the most to her came during a quiet evening at Windsor Castle 6 months after her initial intervention. She was walking through the castle gardens when she encountered William and Catherine with their children, enjoying a family moment away from public scrutiny. The children ran to greet their great-aunt with enthusiasm, chattering about their day and their excitement about the coming baby, and watched William and Catherine interact with their children, noting the relaxed happiness that marked their family time. "Aunt," and Catherine said as the children ran ahead toward the castle, "I wanted to thank you again for everything you did for us. Not just the public support, but showing us what family loyalty really means." William nodded in agreement. "You changed more than just how we handle media criticism. You changed how we think about being part of this family," and hugged them both warmly. "You two would have found your way through the difficulties eventually. I just helped you realize that you didn't have to do it alone." As they walked back toward the castle together and reflected on the journey they had all taken, the crisis that had brought them to that crucial family meeting in October had ultimately led to positive changes that benefited everyone. The royal family's new commitment to supporting each other openly and honestly had become a defining characteristic of their modern identity. They had learned to balance institutional responsibilities with individual needs, creating a model that honored tradition while embracing necessary change. Looking toward the future, and felt optimistic about what they could accomplish together. The challenges facing the monarchy in the modern world were significant, but they now had the tools and the unity to meet those challenges effectively. The transformation that had begun with a simple decision to prioritize family over protocol had created a legacy that would benefit the royal family for generations to come, and had kept her promise to protect William and Catherine, but in doing so, she had also helped create a stronger, more resilient institution. as evening fell over Windsor Castle, and knew that her fearless move had accomplished everything she had hoped for and more. The royal family had rediscovered the power of standing together, and they would never again allow one of their own to face difficulties in isolation. The new royal legacy was one of mutual support, honest communication, and unwavering family loyalty. It was a legacy that would endure long after the immediate crisis that had prompted its creation, serving as a foundation for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. And smiled as she made her way back to her apartments, knowing that she had played a crucial role in ensuring the royal family's strength and unity for years to come. The fearless move had become the catalyst for lasting positive change, proving that sometimes breaking with tradition was the most traditional thing of all.